our fifth and final dressing for our Building Healthy Bowls class is a creamy pesto dressing. And the reason I chose this one was, in addition to completing a trip around the world here, now we're in Italy, is to give you an alternative to a typical pesto. You can certainly go to the pasta class and use a traditional pesto and just thin it out with a little bit of oil, water, lemon juice, and make that into a dressing as well. But this one we're going to make actually doesn't have the large amount of olive oil that is in that dressing. So this is a very flavorful but actually quite low calorie dressing that we can use. And it also has the benefit for anyone that doesn't eat dairy that it's totally dairy free. And traditional pesto has Parmesan in it as well. So we're still going to give it that umami flavor that Parmesan has, but in a different way, which I'll explain. So first we're going to make our creamy base, and go ahead and add these things to the food processor. So I have some silken tofu. Really important that you actually use the silken type, otherwise it's going to be chunky and not smooth and creamy. And then I have some cashew butter here. You'd buy it just where you would buy peanut butter or other nut butters in the store. If they don't have it when you go to purchase that, what they do have that would work really well is actually a sunflower seed butter. I think that's pretty much in all typical grocery stores now because it's a replacement in a lot of schools for peanut butter since there are a lot of nut allergies. So I'll go ahead and put that in there. The high fat content in the little bit of cashew butter that we're using and from the nuts, the pine nuts that we'll add in a little bit, are going to add some of the richness that we're not having with the oil here. And then I'm going to add the garlic. We want to get that chopped up a bit more than that. No one wants a big piece of garlic. And then we'll add a little lemon juice just so we have some liquid to get this pulsing. I had a little more than I need in there, and I'll save that just for adjusting flavoring at the end. And now we'll go ahead and just pulse this. It doesn't have to be perfectly smooth at this point, but if you can get it pretty close, that's ideal. I just need to scrape down the sides a bit. Some of that silken tofu is just getting stuck up on the sides. Because in the final product, it's not going to be totally smooth. We actually want some of the texture of the pine nuts and the herbs. Then you're not really going to notice, again, if you don't get it totally smooth. We'll put this here. Okay, that's good. So we're going to leave that there for now. And then one thing I wanted to show you is just measuring out the basil. So it says to use 3 cups packed of basil. I wanted to show you if you're not pressing it down as hard as you can, trying to do, some sort of resistance training, but it should be compressed a bit in the container. I just want to show you how much bigger that will look when it's fluffed up so you can see how much basil you're actually going to need. And this is pretty much the same measurement as the regular pesto that you'll make as well in the other class. So it's a very large bowl of basil, so you can see it really expands. And so this is going to take about 6 to 8 ounces of basil. So typically if you're buying the big containers at the grocery store, you're going to need at least 1 if you're having the recipe, and closer to 2. And then the other thing that I have here for herbs is parsley. This isn't necessarily traditional in pesto, but the basil starts to brown pretty quickly after you chop it up. But the parsley stays a nice bright green color. So this will keep it from all looking brown and not very appetizing. It will keep some green in there. And the volume of parsley to basil is quite small, you can see. So it's not going to overwhelm the flavor of the basil. So it's just a nice appearance trick that you can use when you're cooking. And so we're going to go ahead and remove this from the food processor. This is kind of like a fussy extra step. It'll give you a little bit better texture. If you don't want to mess around doing this step, you can skip it if you want, but I want to show you how to get the best product, so I'll go ahead and do that. I'm going to scrape this out into this container I have off to the side, and then we're going to process the pine nuts and the herbs that we have here. All right, so now we're going to go ahead and put in our basil and parsley. Here we go. Probably you'll have to do it in a couple batches, so add some of it, pulse it until it reduces in volume a little bit, and then add the rest. And then in this step, we're going to get our parsley, our basil, and our pine nuts minced up. And you want to use the pulsing feature on your food processor for this. If you just let it run, it's going to kind of turn into a liquid, or you'll get rid of any of the texture. Okay. Hopefully you can see this nice green color. I wish you could smell it. It's just such a great summery smell, and will really transport you to summer if you're not already there. I think I can fit the parsley in there as well, so I'll just pulse that in. And you do want to remove the big stems from the basil and the parsley. The stems will kind of end up not chopping up as well with this volume in a traditional food processor. You can also use a blender to do this, but you'll probably have to add most of the ingredients together to have enough liquid. It will turn out a little bit different, but it will still be a very tasty dressing. So now we're going to add our pine nuts. And these pine nuts I have are lightly toasted. Pine nuts typically have a better flavor when they're toasted, although you do want to save some time. You can certainly put them in there raw. To toast them, you can put them just in a regular skillet on the stovetop on low. Shake them around a bit every few seconds. You don't want to walk away. They burn very quickly, and as soon as they burn, they have a really bitter flavor, and you wouldn't want to add that. You'd end up just wasting all of these ingredients, which, this is one of the more expensive dressings to make in the list that we have, so this would be, definitely something you don't want to ruin. And then the most important thing not to over process here is the pine nuts, because it will turn into like a butter instead of having a little texture, a little crunch. Okay, so now we're going to add the rest of our ingredients and just pulse a couple times to mix it up, and we'll be all finished. So one of the ways that we're going to give this like a cheesy flavor is something called nutritional yeast. So nutritional yeast has tons of B vitamins, including B12. So if you're someone who's a strict vegetarian or vegan, it's a good way to get that in if you're trying to avoid having to take supplements, anything like that. But actually I encounter B12 as a very common deficiency among pretty much every group of people. So it's a nice thing to add to your diet every so often. But it gives things a nice cheesy flavor. Actually good on popcorn. It's good on anything that you like, cheesy flavor, and it can be dry. So I'm going to sprinkle that in there. All right. And then I'm actually going to add a little bit of salt. Lots of ingredients. This is when you have a little extra time to make this one. All the other dressings are a bit quicker to make. And then the other thing I'm adding here is curry powder. So really interesting addition. It certainly doesn't taste anything like curry powder when you're done. There's something about the combining of the cashew butter, the curry powder, and the nutritional yeast, the varying types of umami, balance of flavors will really blend together to give it a pretty convincing cheesy taste. So that's why all those are there. And then we'll also have to add our silken tofu mixture. All right. Then I don't want to overpulse this, so I'm going to go ahead and add about half the water I have here. To start, it'll just drizzle in this food processor, and I'll pulse it. And I'm going to scrape down the sides. The nutritional yeast and the cashew butter will also soak up some liquid, so get it a little thinner than you think you're going to need it, because it will actually get thicker. It'll be very hard to mix into anything if you're using it as a dressing on a salad or a bowl. So we're going to need quite a bit more water here. You can see it's getting lighter in color there through the side of the food processor. Still looks quite thick to me. I'm going to add more water. And your ingredients are going to differ each time you get them. So it says to use a couple tablespoons of water in the recipe. Sometimes you're going to need quite a bit more than that. I'm using quite a bit more than that. Your silken tofu can be also more or less water. Okay, so let's check the consistency of this. We'll see how close we're getting. We're pretty good, actually. Pulse it up a little bit more just to get it a bit more combined, and I think we're ready to adjust for seasoning. Okay, that should be good. All right, so I hope you can see this really bright, vibrant green color. This is really good on any of the bowls or salads, but it would be delicious anytime you would have like a caprese salad, having whole pieces of basil, having some fresh tomatoes, or if you had either some plant-based or regular fresh mozzarella, drizzling it over that. It's really good in a sandwich, so especially in some sort of grilled sandwich, this is going to be very delicious. We'll just add a lot of flavor. It's really good to combine with things that don't have as strong of a flavor as well. So, if you're having something with tofu and you're trying to figure out a way to like spice things up or flavor things up a bit, this is a good addition. It's really tasty. I think it's great the way it is. If yours tastes a little too bland, you can add some more of that reserved lemon juice that you have. You could add some salt. And again, how much you're going to need is really going to depend on how much of that water you have to add, how diluted it gets, etc. And you can, as you make it, you can also adjust to your own personal preferences. I tell my students in class that you don't get any bonus points for sticking exactly to the recipe. I actually highly encourage you to experiment and see what you like. So I hope you really enjoy this creamy pesto dressing that was made without oil.